unconventional generosity. So it's fun to be unconventional. And I had some fun thinking of unconventional ways that we could be generous. And it reminded me of this Unity minister who said, "We need extra money." Ever heard that before? He said, "The biggest giver can pick 3 hymns." So the offering trays went around, and after the offering was collected, it was brought to him. And as he went to bless the offering, he looked, and right on top was a $100 bill. And he said that the person who gave this gift gets to pick 3 hymns. So who was it? And Agnes was kind of sitting in the back. Agnes had been going to this church for 50 years. So Agnes came up, and the minister said, "What hymns would you like?" She looked out over the congregation. She thought, "I'll take him and him and him." Oh, boy. Well, as you know, and I've spoken many times, and it means a lot to me to talk about my spiritual path and where it began for me. And I really started to notice it when I discovered Unity back in 2000. I don't know what year it was. At a certain year, does it make any difference at a certain time? I hate to think. In 1991, I went to Unity Church in Walnut Creek, and discovered that there's something about that place was magical for me. As soon as I walked in, I realized I felt family. Have you felt that here? And you know, there's something about Unity people, and I think because we're so open-minded and loving and accepting, you know, that I saw that, and my heart went, whoa. And I left and didn't come back again for 6 months. Because there's something there that I felt that was pulling on me. And I discovered later what that was. After I taught Sunday school for 6 years, I was on the board for 6 years. I did the announcements for 7 years, and I participated in everything, wrote skits, performed skits, was active at the very heart of this ministry. And one day, the minister said to me, "When are you going to become a minister?" It's like, whoa, really? So I went through the application process, and I was accepted by Unity, and was called to come to this place in Missouri, Unity Village. Unity Village is known by a number of things. It's known throughout the Kansas City area, the Kansas City area, and it's known for the tower, which is a water tower that holds 150,000 gallons of water that supplies water for the whole village. And it's also known for this, right in the center of the picture here is a cupola. If you see the cupola, that's the Silent Unity cupola. And that is where the Silent Unity building is. And in that place, someone is praying 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. And in that surrounding building, there are people taking calls from all over the world. And if you haven't done it before or in a long time, I encourage you to do it. They get about 1.5 million phone calls a year. When I worked there, when I was in ministerial school, I prayed with about 60 people in my 8.5-hour shift. I like to think it's every bit as powerful as the work I did in this building. In the foreground is what used to be the education building. Up on the second floor on the left-hand side is where I attended classes for 2 years. And how this relates to Unity Walnut Creek was quite surprising to me. when I was accepted to ministerial school and I went to Missouri, Unity Walnut Creek sent me a check every month to help me to pay for my expenses. Didn't cover all of it, but it covered a significant amount of it. And for me, it just touched me so much because of their unconditional generosity, for their unconventional generosity in a lot of ways that people would look at it. So today we're talking about unconventional generosity. You know, our generosity, your generosity, accelerates the flow of everything positive in your life. Generosity is an energy that we create when we are generous. So, and to be unconventionally generous means to do it without attachment, without being generous with the intention of receiving something in return. You know, we talk a lot in Unity about the law of cause and effect, that every effect has a specific and predictable cause. Everything is caused by something. Every experiences in our lives are caused by our thoughts, our thinking, and by other people's thoughts and thinking. And every cause or action has a specific and predictable effect. Now, often, this law is used to enforce the idea that we get when we give. It's a misunderstanding of the law. We don't give so that we get. We give because we love to give. And people wonder, how come I can't be prosperous? I tithe all the time. I give all the time. And the reason that they don't is because you're out of the flow. If you are expecting something in return for your giving, then the universe says, well, you're not open-minded and accepting. And oftentimes the universe gives us something different than what we give. I think oftentimes people tithe and give thinking, I'm going to give, so I'm going to get lots of money back. Well, that's not often the way the universe works. The universe rewards us in like manner, but not often in the exact way. Does that make sense? So the challenge for us is, how do we get into a place where we can give generously without expecting something in return? Modern research is showing that generosity is a key element of emotional, physical, and spiritual health. People who give tend to be healthier emotionally, physically, spiritually. Modern research is showing that generosity lowers levels of stress. And if you think of the other part of that, if somebody who is anxious and holding on, that creates stress, right? So when we can truly give from this place of generosity, we're relaxed in it because we don't have any expectation around it. And we can be at peace. Modern research is showing that generosity increases levels of happiness. People who give tend to be happier. And again, if you look at the opposite, someone who is hanging on, holding on, wanting things to be their way, wanting to be prosperous, wanting to have it my way. I think a great example is Scrooge in Christmas Carol. Holding on, gotta have it his way. But when he finally realized that he could give and share what he had, his life changed in a moment. I can remember him dancing across the floor. Remember, have you seen that? In any rendition I've ever seen of A Christmas Carol, when Scrooge realizes that he has life, that he has power, that he has generosity, he's dancing across the floor. And we experience the same thing when we truly give out of that place of generosity. Modern research is showing that generosity helps us to live longer. Interesting. People who give are living longer because they're living healthier, because they're stress-free, or they have less stress in their lives. Modern research is showing that generosity distracts us from the insults of our inner critic. Anybody have an inner critic? Oh no, not me. Don't you dare say that about me. There's no inner critic in here. We looked at Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, a year or so ago, and the great chapter was really an awakening, I think, for me and for many of us to discover that inner critical voice that we all have, don't we? And it's always giving its own little monologue. I know it's doing it right now, saying, don't listen to that guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not an inner critic. I'm here to help you out. I'm here to give you advice. I'm here to tell you what's true and what's not true, yeah? And it's interesting, when we are generous, it's hard for that inner critic to criticize us. Because in some way, it knows that what we are doing is right. So, when we're generous, the inner critic the volume goes down. Modern research is showing that generosity helps us be more sensitive to others. Because when we are generous, we're able to connect with other people. We're able to see from another person's perspective, which helps us to get a better picture of ourselves. It helps us to connect with reality. It helps us to be more sensitive to other people besides ourselves. Oh, and there are other people around besides yourself. So, when we're sensitive to others, we become less self-focused. Because the more self-focused we are, the more unhappier we are. So if we can raise our consciousness, our awareness, our thinking to be less focused on ourselves, we'll be happier. True for you. Oh no, don't agree to that. Modern research is showing that generosity spiritually helps us connect with our Christ self. And why is that? Because the truth of it is, there's only one. We are all expressions of God. We're all expressions of the Christ. And so when we are being generous, we are being Christ-like. I think Jesus Christ was probably the most generous person in the world. And when we are generous, we are connected to that Christ-like part of ourselves, that part of us that wants to give, wants to give love. And by the way, we're not talking about just money in all of this. We're talking about giving love, sharing joy, being peaceful, being truthful, being honest, recognizing the Christ in other people. When we can stop being focused on ourselves, we can see the Christ in other people. Interesting, it just came to me that when we're focused on ourselves, all we see is the lack in ourselves. But when we can focus on others, we can behold the Christ in them. And interestingly enough, when we do that, we share the Christ that is within us. Ooh, that gives me chills. I don't know where that came from. There's a Buddhist saying that says, your happiness is my happiness. Why? Because we're all one. When I'm happy, you're happy. When you're happy, I'm happy. When I behold the Christ in you, it lights you up, and it lights me up, doesn't it? Can you see it when somebody really looks at you and beholds the Christ in you? You can see it. You can feel it. You can be it because it is the truth. There's a wonderful story about Dardo Rinpoche. He is a greatly respected Tibetan monk and founded a school in India for Tibetan refugees. And one time he was in the middle of a performance or in a sacred service. And these services, they spend hours preparing for them. And they wear special spiritual garments. And there's much practice and rehearsal that goes into these long spiritual events. And the story says that he was involved in one of these events, and it was a very sacred moment. And a child walked in and said, I don't understand this. I don't understand my homework. And he stopped in the middle of his celebration to help that child with his homework. Unconventional generosity. To be able to take that moment and give and share love with a child. How many times do we do that? When something interrupts us, are we able to show the same kind of compassion and the same kind of love? To be able to stop what we're doing and be present for someone in that moment. Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, said, whether we make a large or small gift, let's make it with largeness of cheer and joy, even of hilarity, remembering that God loveth a hilarious giver. Don't you love that? Wow, that's the way I want to give, with hilarity. With fun, with no attachment, and knowing that what I give is going out to the world and helping to contribute to a world of prosperity and peace and love and joy. Imagine giving from that place. Can you feel that? Can you feel, and I love that remembering that God loveth a hilarious giver. Well, not that God is apart from us, separate, individual, having that experience, but God is the universe that loves a hilarious giver, someone who is laughing out of joy as they give. So dare to be unconventionally generous. Take frequent opportunities to be generous. Give for the love of giving without attachment to what you might get in return. Can you feel the difference in that? It's like, I'm just going to give because I love to give. I don't care how it comes back to me. I know it will. We live in a universe where there's give and take and flow, and good always is coming to us, especially when we're open to receive it. But if we have demands or insist that it comes in a certain way, we restrict the ability of the universe to give us that which it desires to give us. So here's a few ways that you can practice being unconventionally generous. Give someone your full attention. You ever find yourself in the middle of a conversation? Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Oh, I'm just texting a friend of mine. I was with somebody in a conversation this week, and they were carrying on two conversations at one time, one with me and one with this other person. And it's like, wow, don't we? And okay, yeah, or on your computer. on the phone, trying to talk to somebody at the same time. I've noticed that multitasking doesn't work, right? Forever, I know when I was in the business world, people always say, you got to multitask, you got to do multiple things at one time. I was going to say bull. But, we can really only focus on one thing at a time because we know that everything is a prayer. And if we're trying to, I think it's pretty hard to do two prayers at the same time. Have you ever noticed? So when you're with somebody, be totally present for them. Look in their eyes. Relate to them. See them. Be conscious of them. Don't look over their shoulder looking to see who's walking behind them or who's going to be next. But be totally focused on being in that moment. Unconventionally generous. The next thing we can do is to give someone an anonymous surprise gift. And some people say, well, I'm just not the gift-giving type. Yeah, that's exactly why. Right? Because what we're doing here is we are learning to unconventionally be generous so that we can open ourselves to the flow of generosity that wants to be there. Yeah? I'm not a real big gift giver, but I get this because when I give somebody a gift, it puts me in a new place that can be a little bit uncomfortable for me, right? But what it does is gives me the opportunity to be unconventionally generous. And it gives that other person the opportunity to receive, all of which add to the consciousness of generosity. Yeah? So, this is all about pushing your buttons. If you want to experience something different, if you want to experience generosity, you have to do something different. Because what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing and expecting different results. So if you want to experience prosperity and generosity in your life in all ways, you have to be unconventional. Another way is to give generously to an organization that feeds you spiritually. Give to an organization or a person that feeds you spiritually, helps you to remember the truth of who you are. When we give to organizations that support us, we certainly help that organization stay profitable so that we can continue to get information and truth from them, but we also open ourselves up to receive it. We can only get what we give. We can only open ourselves up to experiencing as much generosity as we are willing to receive. This church tithes, and I didn't want to use that word because it scares people, but this church tithes every month to people and organizations that spiritually feed us. And we tithe about $1,000 a month. And I'd like to see it be more, because that's about 10% of what we bring in a month, right? And we tithe on every single dime that comes in here. We sit down at our board meeting and we go, this is how much money we made, we brought in, and we're going to tithe on it. Let's do it. Wow, this is a great thing to do. Yeah? And we take great joy in it, and we do it even if we're in the red. Even if, it's not looking at the moment like we're prosperous. Because we believe in being unconventional. Conventional wisdom says that you don't do that, but universal principles and spiritual truth says you do. If you want to be unconventionally generous and prosperous, you need to step up and be a part of the flow. We need to give to that flow. I love this one. This one's fun. If you want to practice being unconventionally generous, leave some cash in a public place. And don't be caught. Have you ever been someplace and found a dollar bill? I remember finding a $20 bill on the sidewalk when I was a kid. That made my day, right? I don't know if somebody just dropped it there and was like, well, have some fun here, But think about how fun that would be, how fun that is, if you're out someplace, you're in a public restroom, just leave $5 on the sink. If you're someplace, leave it on a table. If you're at the library, leave it on the table. Give something. Be unconventionally generous. And what you're doing is you're giving somebody the opportunity to receive your generosity, and you're giving yourself the opportunity to experience the giving of generosity. Doesn't that sound fun? When I was writing this talk, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to go to the schoolyard sometime when there's no school and take a bunch of change and just throw it on the schoolyard, right? Because I remember when I was a kid how exciting it was to find a dime or a nickel or a quarter. Do you remember? So think of all those children that would find joy in that. So I'm serious. If anybody wants to go sometime to a local school and take a couple handfuls of change and throw them out, I think that would be fabulous. I generously and cheerfully participate in the circulation of good. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment and to feel what it feels like. And maybe you can remember to be a child and to find a quarter on the ground and to bend down and pick it up and hold this quarter as if it was the most magnificent thing that you'd ever found. And then be aware of the feeling that you're feeling. Take a deep breath, breathing in. And in the same way, feel what it would feel like to take a bunch of change and throw it on a schoolyard. Unconventionally letting it go. Feeling that joy of giving. I feel what it feels like to be generous. To be generous. Breathing in and breathing out. I invite you to embrace this feeling as we take a few moments to be in the silence. Breathing in and breathing out. Slowly allowing your generous beingness. The opportunity to return your awareness to this moment. And I invite you to wear this coat of generosity. And I invite you to open your eyes whenever you're ready. And let's say this prayer of St. Francis together. It's a lot about being generous. Let's say it together. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to console as to console, to understand as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Where I live, there are rain.